Well, shalom and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Friday night shiur right here on the Ani Judaism radio broadcast, as well as on our official Roku channel. You can also go and get archives through TuneIn Radio. You can also get archives absolutely free from Apple Podcasts. You can get them from our website, from our Vimeo channel, and you can also watch the videos right there on our official Roku channel. Okay. Now, we have um, a very special Torah portion today. And why is it that we, people are asking me, no, that was disciple, as the title card said, disciple. But anyway, we have a very special Parshas here today, and the reason why it is that this is a very special Parshas is because this Parshas actually is my birth week Parshas. This was the Torah portion that was studied, and the one that came about in the Torah portion cycle the week that I was born, back in 1980. So it's really interesting that, the thing that we're going to be talking about here today is something that really is basically the core of who I am as a believer in Yeshua HaNotzri. How so? Well, first of all, years ago, probably about a good 10 to 12 years ago, I was basically kind of the lone voice in the various biblical faiths that was actually teaching about Torah Shebe'al Peh. It's one of the very few that was out there saying, that if we are going to fulfill mitzvahs, we have to do it through that of halakha. Since that time, you have seen a lot of people break away from the Hebrew roots movement. You see a lot of people breaking away from this sola scriptura thing that has caused, 36,000 denominations within Christianity. You have seen more and more people increase in ahava, simcha, chokmah, da'at, all of these things. You have seen people increase in it because of the fact that they are now given an understanding of the Torah through that of Torah Shebe'al Peh. And you have many believers now that are teaching Torah Shebe'al Peh, and it's kind of become the norm. Yeah, we do have the anti-Semitic fringe, within the Hebrew roots movement, and all the others that still fight against this and all this other stuff that, and we're going to go and show within this Torah portion here today that this Torah portion proves that there is indeed rabbinic authority and that we must be following halakha if we claim that we are pursuing the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to start out with a couple of verses here, starting in Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 10 through 13. Reading from the Gutnick Chumash, it says, "You must obey the words that they will tell you from the place God will choose. You should carefully observe everything they instruct you. You should act in accordance with the teachings that they instruct you and in accordance to the judgments they issue you. You must not divert from the words they tell you, even if they tell you that right is left and left is right. If a man intentionally disobeys and fails to listen to the priest who is standing in the offering there before God, your God, or the judge of what? The judge of the Sanhedrin, that man must die. Thus you will eliminate this evil from Israel. They should wait until the next festival to execute him, so that all the people will hear of it and be afraid, so that they will no longer disobey intentionally." Okay. Now, there's many people that have kind of taken that verse and they've tried to, say that it's talking about something else. But what is this entire Torah portion talking about? What is the context of this? It is talking about the Shoftim, the judges, the judges in the Sanhedrin. We have another Torah portion as well, Parshas Mishpatim, that goes over this premise. 6 chapters within that of the Torah Shebektav, of the written Torah, tell us to obey the words of the Sanhedrin. But yet, these 2 parshiot seem to be forgotten and ignored by a vast majority of individuals in, for instance, the Hebrew Roots movement. Now, to validate this, let us actually go to the Talmud. It says in Sanhedrin 87a, it says, our Pasuk says that we must do everything they will tell you according to one opinion. A judge can become a zakin, and they I miswrote that there. Manitzur, disputing a ruling of the Great Sanhedrin regarding a rule that is not written clearly in the Torah, but is based entirely upon what they tell you, even a rabbinic interpretation. Let's give it an example of something like this. Let's take something very easy, something within our time. Say that it is that you go and you tell somebody, a man in a Joker mask entered a movie theater, or entered a theater. Let's not even put movie theater. Erase that. A man in a Joker mask entered a theater. Now, there is going to be tons of different interpretation as to the context of that. Some people's minds might go to the Aurora shooting and say, this is what it is that is being referred to here. This is referring to the Aurora shooting. Another person would say, wait a minute here. This is talking about, some sort of Comic-Con event, and there is a new Joker movie that is coming out. So therefore, this is what it's talking about here. It's talking about something at Comic-Con. Another person would say, this is a person on Halloween going and dressing up with their child. They're going to go see a Batman movie. Okay? And so you have all of these different things on what it is that these things could possibly mean. Now, the thing is that when you get into the Sola Scriptura realm, or you get into the Kyrite realm, the thing is that a person can go and say that either of those premises is what is being talked about in the phrase, a man wearing a Joker mask went into a theater. Then we have to ask, when it says a theater, is it a musical theater or is it a movie theater? Oh, see that interpretation as well. Or is it a dinner theater? Is he an actor in the dinner theater or in a play? Are they doing a play about Joker or Batman or something like that? There are so many different things that can be interpreted from a particular statement of something that a person sees happening. And there is context that is left out. And so therefore, think on this now. We have something that could take place today, a statement that could take place today. Okay. And you see how many different interpretations that it is that we have off of a statement that could only be made in this time, in this era. Now let's go back 5,000 years. 5,000 years. We have no eyewitnesses are alive today that can tell us that this is what this particular thing means. This is the way that we did it at the time of Mount Sinai. This is the way, this is what Moses had said during that time. This is how it was interpreted at that time. Basically, the best a Sola Scriptura person can do is give a guess. That's it. Not only is that an issue, but also you have the issue of hashkafa. What is hashkafa? It's worldview. You have the issue of worldview. and to look at the idea of worldview. Here in the United States, if you go and you say, I have a flat, what does that mean? That usually means I have a flat tire. My car's tire is flat. But if I go to England and I say I have a flat, it means that I have a bit of land somewhere. That bit of land is called a flat. So there is a worldview through that of idiomatic expression that differs in the 21st century here in the United States than it does in England. So exactly the same time. But not only do we have a 5,000 year difference, but we also are trying to interpret something that is on the other side of the world. Okay? So the thing is, especially when it is that we are relying upon, many of you, I'm sure, are relying upon translation. Sadly, not enough people speak the Semitic languages in many of the believing communities. So what happens is you see how the entire thing with the Joker and mask and going into a theater, how that could be interpreted in many different ways. Now take that and say, okay, now interpret it 5,000 years ago in a different language with a different hashkafa and with idiomatic expression that you are not familiar with. Very problematic. So what I say and what I do and what the rest of Judaism does is say, let's go back to fulfilling the mitzvahs from Parshas Shoftim and Parshas Mishpatim, and let's interpret it the way that it was interpreted then by people who had this entire line of rulings that were memorized, finally written down, voted on to be written down during that of the diaspora, finally written down thousands or over 1,000 years before that of your earliest Christian commentary on the New Testament. It's so interesting to me. I when I was younger, I used to have the Life Application Bible. Life Application Bible when I worked at Lifeway Christian bookstores. That was the Bible to get. But the thing that I noticed is that within the thing about it was a really nice study Bible. And I remember looking at it and I was thinking to myself, even back then, way back then when I was like, 21, 22, somewhere around there, I was looking at it and I was saying to myself, the thing is that a lot of these commentaries that were written in here were in the 1960s. And I was starting to become, I was getting into this whole thing of asking questions about the Torah and all that stuff around 2001, 2002, and, the keeping of which. And the thing that I realized about the Life Application Bibles, I was sitting over there going, what about people who are around that gave commentary on the Bible much earlier than these guys? I mean, I want the stuff that is close to the time of Jesus for me to be able to properly interpret the words of Jesus. Now, the thing with Talmud is that we have two different things in there. Yes, we have commentary within that of Gemara that is usually used through that of what is called Agadah and Midrashim, story, folklore, also known as parody, a tactic that Yeshua HaNotzri himself even ended up using. But also, we have the Mishnah. The Mishnah section is usually in certain volumes, it's all in caps. In certain volumes, it's in bold print. And what that is those rulings from the Sanhedrin that Deuteronomy chapter 17, verses 10 through 13 says that it is that we have to uphold or the penalty of death. We have more evidence of this as well. Sefer HaChinuch, or Sefer HaChinuch, rather, says in Mitzvah 496, the prohibition to defy the directives of the great Sanhedrin is, it is forbidden to dispute the masters of the oral tradition, and it is forbidden to deviate from their words or to depart from the instruction in any Torah manners. Within that, and this whole idea is actually wrapped up within that of chapter 12 of Exodus, and when Onkelos translated the Hebrew Torah to that of Aramaic in the famous Targums of Onkelos, he goes and he talks about how it is that a person who is Jewish, if they advocate against even the smallest of mitzvahs, kind of parallels to that of Matthew chapter 5, doesn't it? If they advocate against it, they are considered a nochar. A nochar is below that of a goy, and around the area of a czar, which is a heathen, the worst of any kind of person. People go and go and insult somebody by calling them a goy. A goy is just basically a secularist, but a nochar or a czar is somebody who is a heathen. They worship other gods. And so basically this is where it is that Onkelos got the reason, in order to translate that part of Exodus chapter 12 the way in which it is that he did. Now, the thing with this is that some people would say, didn't Yeshua speak against that of the Torah Shebiapeh, the oral Torah? Didn't he speak against that? Christopher, have you never read Mark chapter 7? Have you never read what it talks about in Matthew chapter 15? Yeah, I have. And it's very interesting because when you learn about the laws of Al Netilat Yadayim, and if you particularly go and read about the laws of Al Netilat Yadayim, the ceremonial hand washing, we see that what it is that Shulchan Aruch says in terms of this, and what Yeshua says in terms of this, is the exact same thing. They even quote the exact same scripture. Yeshua was going and giving the same halakha that all other Jews were giving, but what the issue that was going on there is that he was coming in contact with the followers of Shammai. Who was Shammai? We have to understand, first of all, there were 5 different sects of Pharisaic Judaism at the time. The 2 big ones were the ones who followed Hillel. The other followed that of Shammai. Now, with this, the thing that we can see by looking at the halakha of Yeshua and who it is that he quoted most often in terms of Torah Shebiapeh, we see that he quoted Hillel 9 times out of 10. That one other time he would quote Shammai. He agreed with Shammai in terms of that, of the tax, and he agreed with Shammai in terms of divorce. And now the followers of Shammai, however, the followers of Shammai would end up going and saying, it is not about going and connecting with Hashem, it's just going and fulfilling mitzvahs to its hilt, even if it is that you don't understand it. Now, this is in total and complete contradiction to many of the other things within that of the oral Torah. But see, Shammai wasn't getting this from the oral Torah. The Pharisees that were the followers of Shammai. Instead, they were getting it for the reason of the things that Yeshua warned about in Matthew chapter 23. So the idea to say that Yeshua was speaking against the oral Torah, but these very people who say that Yeshua HaNotri was speaking against the oral Torah have never looked or read what the oral Torah says about Netilat Yadayim, about this very thing, and see that it quotes Yeshua word for word or vice versa. It's the exact same thing in the words of Yeshua in Mark chapter 7 and in Matthew chapter 15. Okay, so that is very important. That's very important. Let's go to another slide here. This is the very verses that we talked about here. Yeshua validates the oral Torah. Yeshua then spoke with the Kenshei and his Talmudei, and he said to them, the Sepharhum, the scribes, the learned individuals of the Torah, and the Parshi sit on the throne of Moshe. Therefore, everything that they say to you that you should keep and do, but not according to their deeds, for they talk, but do not. Reading from the Aramaic Jewish, or for the Ani Jewish Aramaic New Testament. You want to learn Aramaic? Go and pick up that volume right there. And then he goes on to things that if you read on there, he's over there talking about things that, first of all, are things within the Torah Shebektav, things such as tefillin, and the zitziot. He's talking about those things. Is he condemning those things? Chas v'shalom. God forbid. What he took issue with there was the haughty nature in which it is that a person would fulfill mitzvahs. If you fulfill mitzvahs to the heights of halakha, but you do it lishma as opposed to lishma Hashem, for the sake of self as opposed to for the sake of Hashem, then you have defiled mitzvahs. It's better that you have not gone and fulfilled it in any way, shape, or form. That's the issue that Yeshua had here. Talking about egotism, haughtiness, being put on a higher mandrega, when, however, the oral Torah says the very same thing that Yeshua says, which is that a person must lower themselves, as the saints of Pirkei Avos, be not like servants who serve their master for the sake of receiving a reward, rather be like servants who serve their master not for the sake of receiving a reward, and may the awe of heaven be upon you. So, according to that, let's go to Sanhedrin 87a within the Talmud. According to one opinion, someone becomes Zekiyin, Mamre, only if he disputes a law that is written, at least in a general way, in the Torah, and is explained by the sages. He learns this from our pasuk, which says, according to the Torah, that they will teach you, which means that it must be a Torah law that is explained by the sages. Okay, now the question then becomes here, I get a lot of people that ask me about the Rambam. Okay, honestly, I have to say that places like Art Scroll, I love Art Scroll. Art Scroll is the hilt, okay, of biblical scholarship in terms of the Torah, the Ketuvim, and the Nevi'im. You can never go wrong with Art Scroll. But I do take issue with their Rambam edition. Why do I take issue with the Rambam edition? Because of the fact that, first of all, we have to realize that with certain individuals, most notably the Rambam, I can't think of anybody else that has had this issue, but the Rambam had two sets of commentaries. We had his philosophical ones, which are not based on the Torah, and then we had his Torah-based commentaries. Now, the issue of what Art Scroll did is, with Art Scroll, every volume has to be massive, okay? So what they've done is they've taken those things that deal with his philosophy and put it within that of his Torah commentaries. Okay, so that volume is just a big mishmash. I had that several years ago, and the thing about it was I couldn't trust it because of the fact of with the Rambam, we have they decided to put the two together, which was entirely problematic. And so with that, I would say, something like that, don't trust the Art Scroll edition of the Rambam. If you go to Rashi, you're going to be fine, with that. Or if you're able to just get, the Rambam's Torah commentaries and not his ones on philosophy, you'll be totally fine if you just exclusively use that one. Mishmashing the two is going to be entirely problematic. But, with the Rashi, you're fine. With the Talmud, you're fine. With the Mishnah, you're fine. With the Tosefta, you're fine. With the words of Chazal, except for that one little issue with that of the Rambam, you're going to be perfectly fine. Because it's all in accordance with talking about and issuing judgments in terms of Torah law. Okay. And so all of those are going to be perfectly fine. Now, we also have this as well. In Mark chapter 12, verse 18, reading again from the Ani Jewish Aramaic New Testament, the Sechwadei, or the Zarachei, the Sadducees came to him, those who say there is no Chamatha, resurrection, and they are asking him and saying, These were the Sadducees that came to that of Yeshua HaNotzri. They did not believe in the concept in Hebrew known as Tekiyas Ma'asim, resurrection of the dead. They did not believe in this concept. In fact, there's many other things that they didn't believe in as well. As we see in Acts chapter 23, verse 6. And Paul knew parts of the Nasha were Zedeche, and part of the Pershe, or the Fershe, they cried out, the Kenusha, Nasha, my Achi, I am a Pharisee, son of a Pharisee, and for the Sabra, and for the Chayamatha of Mithe, I am judged. Because those concepts right there, resurrection of the dead, angels, concept of Mashiach, all those things, the Sadducees did not believe in those things. Why didn't the Sadducees believe in those things? They did not believe in those things because of the fact that they rejected Torah Shebiape. They said, Torah Shebiape, we don't need it. But at the same time, somebody tries to say Torah Shebiape, well, that's tradition. No, it's not tradition. What is Torah Shebiape? When the Sanhedrin goes and gives a ruling, are they just giving rulings just to give rulings? What's the reason why it is that they're doing that? Why is the Sanhedrin giving rulings? The reason why they're giving rulings, first of all, is let's say you have a Torah commandment that says build a table. Well, first of all, you have to know how to build a table. You have to make sure that the table is not going to collapse when you put something on it. You got to make sure that it's not going to go and crush your animals if they get underneath it. You got to make sure it's sturdy. Got to make sure it's level. Has to make sure of all these things. Torah Shebiape, what that does is it tells you how to construct the table. People say that it's adding to the Torah. No. What Torah Shebiape is doing is that it's showing you how to fulfill a commandment within that Torah Shebektav, so you don't kill yourself or come up with something goofy, like saying that the earth is flat or something like that. That's why it is that Torah Shebiape, the oral Torah, exists. That's its functionality. That's why it exists. Now, in terms of this, these concepts that Paul talks about within chapter 23 of Acts, of things that it is that he believes in, that the Sadducees did not believe in, were things such as the concept of Messiah, resurrection of the dead, angels, all of these things he rejected. Or he didn't reject, but the Sadducees rejected. Why did the Sadducees reject those things? Because they are exclusive to the oral Torah. In fact, the oral Torah is where it is that we get proof of two comings of Messiahs, Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. Coming in the exact same way that Yeshua came the first time, in the exact same way he comes the second time. Exact same way. This is a concept that is not foreign to Judaism. This is why it is that you find many Pharisees going and coming to Yeshua and accepting Yeshua as Mashiach. You don't read of one single Sadducee coming to Yeshua. Not a single one. Can't name a single one in history either that has ever come to Yeshua as the Messiah. You're not going to find one single Karaite ever, because these concepts are rejected by the Sola Scriptura crowd. Because, first of all, the thing that they will ask is, show me in the Torah Shebektav where it says that I must accept a Messiah in order to make it into the Olam Haba. Show me in the, this is where you always hear, show me in the plain, literal meaning of the text. Basically, they want you to look at your Bible as though it's a storybook. In fact, the Sadducees saw the things, the mystical things that had happened, such as Jacob's dream, as just being a storybook tale. They didn't see it as historical. They didn't see it as spiritually significant. They said when Jacob's ladder was shown, it was just a dream. That's all it was. Nothing more, nothing less, just a dream. Within today's biblical faith, we have a backdoor anti-missionary group known as the Kirites. Many people go in and hail and praise this guy, Nehemiah Gordon. But notice anybody that he comes in contact with, such as Jonah Vander, such as Mike Haynes, such as Jim Morgan, such as Ronnie James. These are people you probably haven't heard of or haven't heard of in such a very long time. One of which was actually my co-host years ago. What happened to all these guys? Why is it that you don't hear these names in the believing community anymore? Because they started to get very friendly with Nehemiah Gordon. They had decided to become Kirites. And this is what the Kirite will do. They will use the Torah Shebek Tav against you by first of all saying, show me in the plain literal meaning of the text where it is that I have to accept a Messiah in order to get to the Olam Haba. Well, first of all, you don't even believe in the Olam Haba. So why is that? But, that's neither here nor there. But, Kirites don't believe in the Olam Haba either. It's all in the here and now. You're blessed by God if it is that you're very wealthy. Maybe that's why it is that the Kyrite calendar sells for $40. Maybe that's why. But they will start out that way. And then they will say, well, okay, you want to keep this Messiah guy. Why is it that you really need Paul? Because it really seems that Paul is contradicting Yeshua, doesn't it? Paul's never contradicting Yeshua, but instead, again, the Kirites reject the premise of something that is actually clearly spelled out within that of the Torah Shebek Tav, which are the levels of observance. You heard me mention the Goy, the Nochar, and the Zar before, but then you also have the Ger Toshav, you have the Ger Tzedek, and all these things written about in the Hebrew. But most Kirites don't know Hebrew, so in fact, Nehemiah Gordon has to have himself a translator when he goes to Israel, by the way. But, these things are right there. The same thing is not applied for the Ger Toshav as there is for the Ger Tzedek or the Yehudi. So when you're talking to people in Rome, for instance, I really encourage you to go and check out Dr. Mark Nanos's book on this, Paul Within Judaism, as well as his book on Romans and his one on Galatians. Really spells this out great with amazing historical and Talmudic citation. D. Thomas Lancaster also put out a great one on Galatians as well. So go and check that out. But the thing is that one Torah theology is not within Judaism, but it is within Kiritism. So they can use that then. Wait a minute, he's telling the Galatians something different than he's telling the people in the book of Colossians, so they're different people at a different Mendrega, a different level of observance. Of course they're not going to, again, so the Kyrite movie tries to push this one Torah theology, which is heavily flawed, and the Torah Shebek Tav speaks heavily against. First of all, I keep Hasidic Halakha. Do I think that all of you should keep Hasidic Halakha? Chas v'shalom. God forbid. But if you are going to fulfill mitzvahs, you must do it per that of halakha, per that of the Torah Shebek Tav, as it says, as in the passages that we have read from Deuteronomy chapter 17. It says to do those things. But then what the Kyrite will do is say, well, okay, first of all, you don't need Paul. So we're going to go and put Paul off to the side. But now tell me why it is that you need 4 Gospels. You just need one because it's just telling the same story 4 times, right? Oh, by the way, the 4 Gospels are written on a Jewish hermeneutic, which the Kirites also reject, known as Pardes, Peshat, Remez, Drosh, and Sod. But, that's neither here nor there because they don't believe in that, and they don't want you to know anything about that. Okay? And so then they say, well, you know what? We really like this Hebrew Matthew. Yeah, the book of Matthew in Hebrew that is called the Shem Tov Matthew. Now, let me give you the history of the Shem Tov Matthew. The Shem Tov Matthew was actually a Catholic rendering of the Greek into Hebrew. And this is verified because it's actually within the Vatican. And it also uses 16th century Nakud. Okay. This form of Nakud that is used on there, as well as the script that it was written in, is 16th century. And what was the reason for this? Why was it that the Vatican had made this 16th century Hebrew manuscript of the Greek New Testament? Well, the reason why it is that they did it is because of the fact that they were actually debating with not the Baal Shem Tov, but one of the Baal Shem Tovs that was before the main one that you've all heard of, that was the founder of Hasidus. Okay. And so what happened was they went and they created this. And so when they created it, they tried to make it a little more from what their perception of Judaism was, which is really the same as the Karaite perception of Judaism. Um, they decided to go and to, do it in that way, thinking that, well, the generic idea of Jews, we're just going to kind of flow with that. They came up with this text where it is that it refers to Yeshua as Yeshu, Yamak Shemo, which is an acronym meaning may his name be obliterated or erased or, any of those things. And then we're also going to take out, the passage in Matthew 1 where it says Ben David. We're going to take that out in Matthew 1:1. We're going to get rid of the Ben David there because, first of all, we don't want the Messiah to be seen as divine, because then if he's seen as divine to that of these Jews, that they can easily go and dismiss us. But yet, even within Judaism, the concept of the divine Messiah, which I've taught on many times, is found all throughout Jewish texts. But they thought, we're gonna do this. We're gonna tame down Yeshua. So they came up with the Shem Tov Matthew. That's where it actually got its name, because they were debating one of the old Baal Shem Tovs. Some people say it was written by the Baal Shem Tov. It wasn't written by the Baal Shem Tov. Don't give me that. But the Baal Shem Tov was actually it was a job. There were many Baal Shem Tovs before that of the main Baal Shem Tov that had started Hasidus. Okay. And so in the 16th century, they were going and debating one of these guys. And so that's where it comes from. So the Karaite will go and push that on you. And then they're going to use that document and they're going to say, well, wait a minute here. Where does it say in there that the Messiah is divine? And so this is the path that they cause people to go down in order to get them to reject Yeshua. And it all boils down to rejecting the Torah Shebek, or the Torah Shebial Peh. It all comes down to the rejection of Torah Shebial Peh. Every single person that I have known that has gone the Karaite realm has always been somebody who has ultimately rejected Yeshua. Every person that I know of that has studied Torah Shebial Peh day in, day out, has not only retained Yeshua as their Messiah, but they have grown in Yeshua as their Messiah. And they are some of the deepest and biggest voices for Yeshua HaNotzri. And they teach him in the proper context, as opposed to the make it up as you go along idea that comes from the Sola Scriptura route. So we're going to open up the floor right now to questions. I see we got a lot of people that are watching right now on the various social media platforms. So if you have a question, make sure to go ahead and get it in now. Do not wait, because I know there's a slight delay. So make sure to go ahead and get your questions in now. So go ahead and get in your questions. And what I'll do is, some of you are probably saying, okay, well, I've listened to this lesson. I've watched this lesson. And I'm realizing now that I probably should be fulfilling mitzvahs per halakha. How do I go about doing that? Do I need to go and spend thousands of dollars on a set of Talmud? Well, if you can, save up, but there's a great place to start that'll help you along the way. And that's Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Okay. Now, the way Shulchan Aruch is set up is that it helps you fulfill halakha from the morning that you wake up at night to the time that you go to sleep. And then it goes on to certain things within your life that happen, like such as marriage and all of these things, how to fulfill halakha in terms of marriage and all these things. And then it'll get into go through all the major things in life. And then it'll finally end with you preparing for death. Okay, so it takes you through everything, but it does it in a more compact way than the Talmud and Mishnah do. Okay, with my volumes of Talmud that I have in the other room, it's 23 huge books. 23 huge books about the size of something like this. 23 of these, and that's why it's so pricey. It's because it's a massive amount of volumes of books. But you can get Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which is kind of like the Cliff Notes version, and it's more compact, not only compact, but also it takes you through the progression of your day, And so you can get that. It's a 5-book set, and I think you can get that for like 130, somewhere around there. So, there is that. You can start out with Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. In our ordination classes, which I'm starting to teach on September 3rd is our first day for the ordination classes that I'm teaching. One of the things that we'll be going through is Shulchan Aruch, and all the students will get a PDF of the chapters every week that they have to study from Shulchan Aruch in terms of learning halakha. And so that's a great place to start. You can also go and sign up for Daf Yomi. What is Daf Yomi? Daf Yomi is whenever it is that you go and study a page of Talmud every single day. Now, again, the Talmud has, first of all, at the top, it has the Mishnah, which is the ruling from the Sanhedrin, that it is that we are obligated per this week's Torah portion to keep and to do. We are to keep and to do those rulings. But the Gemara section that is underneath there is commentary upon that of the Mishnah, usually in the form of parable, known as Agadah, Midrashim, story, and folklore. But the reason for the story and folklore is to help you to better understand the Mishnah. Okay. And so, the thing is that you can do Daf Yomi, which is a page a day at Talmud. And Art Scroll has a thing to where it is that they send you the volume of Talmud that they are currently in terms of Daf Yomi. And, you go through a page a day and all that stuff. And then after you do a page a day, they send you the next volume and all that stuff. So it's like on a subscription service in terms of the volumes of the Talmud. So you can also go and do that. All right. So it seems that we don't have any questions that I am seeing in here. So considering we don't have any questions, I'm going to wish all of you a good Shabbos. Shabbat Shalom, each and every single person. And, Shalom Bracha. Peace and a blessing. Shalom to each and every single one of you. Bye-bye. So you want to learn Hebrew or Aramaic, or maybe both? Make sure to check out HebrewandAramaic.com. All 3 of the instructors on the website have accredited Moray licenses to teach the languages that they teach on the website. You can take the lessons on your very own time, and they even have a Roku channel so you can learn from the comfort of your very own couch. With over 200 videos going step by step through the languages and all the various scripts, and over 100 PDFs of exercises and quizzes, this is the most thorough set of lessons that you'll find anywhere on the languages of the Tanakh and the Brit Hadashah. So visit HebrewandAramaic.com today and sign up for only $15 a month.